الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. يا عليم علمنا من علمك ما ترضى به عنا ولا تؤاخذنا بما تعلمه منا. يا حليم خلقنا بخلق الحلم وحققنا بحقائق العلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Tonight we continue to talk about riba, backbiting, and we will probably talk about that tomorrow as well. It is, of all things that concern the tongue, one of the most important of all, because of the fact that it is one of the most difficult to control. And so it's important to talk about it. Lying, deceiving, slandering, things like that. They're things that everyone knows are basically wrong. And most people wouldn't do them as a matter of course. And if they did them, they would know that it's something they shouldn't do. The problem with riba is that that's often lost to us. We forget it. So it's important to emphasize it. Imam al-Ghazali emphasizes that riba is fisq. Riba is perversity. And therefore it must be carefully avoided. We mentioned last time that our cultures often make this very difficult because it's usually part of our cultures to talk about other people. And sometimes it's necessary to do that because some people are bad and they're dangerous and you have to warn others about them. And in cases like that, riba does not pertain. And we will talk about that next time, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. When is it permissible to speak about people? So we'll talk about that tomorrow night, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But riba, when it is not fully justified, is a very big wrong, and therefore we have to be careful to observe it. Generally we don't take it seriously because people do it all the time. And also, as we mentioned when we began talking about silence and the tongue, the tongue is so easy for us to use. It is so easy to say words. They seem to be so light, even though in reality they may be so heavy in the scale. To repeat some of what we said last time, riba, backbiting, is whenever we say something about our brother or our sister which is true. It's not a lie, but it's something that there's no need to say, and it would hurt them. It would detract from them. It would diminish their standing in the eyes of others. And it's strictly forbidden. Riba is generally done when people are absent. And that's why it's called riba, which, as we said, comes from al-ghaib, of being absent, not being seen. But riba can also be done in a person's presence. And we'll give an example of that this evening. We talked also about buhtan, which is slander. And buhtan is when we speak about other people, but what we say is false. And that distinction is very important. Buhtan is extremely serious. But riba is also that way. The difference being that riba is always true. It's not a lie. And then we talked also about ifk, which we can call defamation or maligning. And what is the definition of ifk? Who remembers? Yes.
Transmit something that you heard to other people.
Right. So ifk is when you transmit or you pass on. You relate what you heard from others. And that is when you pass on a riba that you heard. You heard someone say something about a person which is true, but it shouldn't be said. If you pass that on, it's ifk. Or if we heard a slander of a person and we pass that on, that's also called ifk. The main thing about ifk or maligning and defamation is that it's always second-hand, whereas riba and buhtan are first-hand. It's the thing that you initiate yourself. But when we pass on the bad words that others have said, that's also a very, very serious moral offense. Imam al-Ghazali emphasizes that God will not forgive us for riba, backbiting, in this world or the next until the person that we have backbitten forgives us. That's extremely difficult. And this is something that we totally want to avoid. And it's something that we never think about. And therefore, we have to ask them to pardon us. That's even more difficult to do. In some cases, we can't do it, because if we mention to the people that we spoke bad about them, that might make the situation even worse. So in cases like that, you want to pray for them. That is the alternative to that. If you can't do that, which is best, then you want to pray for them. We mentioned that riba has a profound influence on our hearts. And that's why it destroys our hearts. And it brings about diseases of the heart. It presents great dangers to the heart. And it also pertains to the fact that in Islam, the honor of your brother or your sister is immensely important. So we want to live with each other, we want to deal with each other and speak about each other in a way that emphasizes each other's honor and in a way that buttresses that honor. And we don't want to say or know anything about each other that detracts from our honor unless it is absolutely necessary, because that is a dangerous person. That is a hypocritical person. That is a person that other people will be preyed on by. In that case, then we have to break the veil and we have to tell about them. But the preservation of honor is a major thing in Islam. So let's go back to where we left off. Imam al-Ghazali says that it was revealed to the Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, من مات تائبا من الغيبة فهو آخر من يدخل الجنة ومن مات مسرا عليها فهو أول من يدخل النار. So he said, whoever dies while repenting from riba shall be the last to enter the garden, and whoever dies persisting in doing riba shall be the first to enter the fire. So it's a huge sin. May Allah protect us from it. May Allah enable us to get control over ourselves and our tongues. We have to strive to do that. That's mujahada. But the person who does tawbah from riba, that person will be the last to enter the garden. Why? Because they have to be forgiven by everyone they did riba of unjustly. Once there were two women from Quraysh in Medina who were fasting. It wasn't a fast of Ramadan, it was just a fast. And the Prophet became very upset with them because all day long they were talking about people. They would sit together, they're fasting, but all day long they're sitting together saying, look at that person, look at this one, look how fat she is, look how skinny he is, look at the way he talks. And they were taking immense pleasure in that. And this is often what people do when they backbite. They get enjoyment out of it. And all of us are capable of that. But it is an unnatural type of enjoyment, and therefore you want to cut yourself off from it. You don't want to allow yourself to do that. So the Prophet said to the two women, he said about the two women, he said this to their father and to other relatives, إِنَّهُمَا لَمْ يَسُومَا وَكَيْفَ يَسُومُ مَنْ ظَلَّ نَهَارَهُ يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ النَّاسِ. And then he said also, إِنَّ هَاتَيْنِ صَامَتَا عَمَّا أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ لَهُمَا وَأَفْطَرَتَا عَلَى مَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمَا جَلَسَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا إِلَى الْأُخْرَى فَجَعَلَتَا تَأْكُلَانِ لُحُومَ النَّاسِ. So the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that they didn't fast at all. And how could they fast if they spent all their day devouring the flesh of other people? Because that is the likeness of riba. May Allah preserve us from it. It's like devouring the flesh of our brother or our sister. And he said that these two fasted, that is, they held back from eating what God had made permissible to them. They didn't have to fast. They could have eaten and they could have drunk things that are halal. But they broke their fast, aftarata, not with water or milk or some other food, but by devouring what God had made prohibited to them. That is, speaking about their brothers and sisters. He said one of them sat to the side of the other, or both of them sat at each other's side, and they began talking about luhum an-nas, the flesh of the people, meaning devouring the flesh of the people by speaking ill of them. Imam al-Ghazali says that the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would always meet each other bil-bishr. That means with great happiness, with smiles on their faces that reflected true happiness in their hearts. None of them would ever backbite the other in his absence, and that was the secret of it, because they were very careful not to joke about each other, not to laugh about each other, not to talk about each other, and to hold each other in the highest dignity. What's really important, Imam al-Ghazali says, is that the Sahaba and those who are their heirs, the Salaf as-Salih, they regarded that to be their most excellent deed. What was their most excellent deed? It wasn't that they fasted. It wasn't that they prayed. It wasn't that they read the Quran. It wasn't that they made Umrah or Hajj, even though they did that. It wasn't that they got up all night to pray, even though they did that. Their greatest deed was that they did not backbite each other. And they were very serious about that. Of course, there were exceptions, like the exception that we just mentioned of the two girls. But again, the Prophet is teaching them, don't do that again. And probably they never did that again, because that was a very serious lesson. But the Prophet wanted to teach them, you didn't fast at all. What is the value of your fast if you are violating the honor of other people by speaking about them? And the Sahaba regarded the people among them who did backbite the people as hypocrites. For them, that was one of the marks by which they distinguished the Sahaba, who were the true lovers of the Prophet, from the hypocrites. The hypocrites talk about people. They backbite people. They laugh about people. They make fun of people. They imitate people. But the Sahaba wouldn't do that. They're very careful to preserve their integrity. And the people who do that, who backbite, Imam al-Ghazali says they were regarded as matrudeen, people who are banished from good, people who are put at a great distance from good. And matrud is almost like mal'oon, it's almost like cursed. Al-Hasan al-Basri, may Allah be pleased with him, who's one of the greatest of all the successors, if not the greatest successor of them all. He said, by Allah, ghiba, backbiting, is faster in destroying a believing man's deen, or a believing person's deen, than gangrene destroys the body, than an akila. He said, Wallahi, lal ghibatu asra'u fi deen al-rajuli al-mu'min min al-akilati fil jasad. And all of you know what gangrene is. Gangrene is one of the most deadly of all infections. People who have diabetes, may Allah cure them of that, but they have to always watch their feet, right? Because of the fact that they often don't feel their feet, as with the great sensitivity that other people do, and they can easily develop gangrene in their feet. I've even had friends that died because of that. They got gangrene in their foot, and it was just too late. It spread. So gangrene is a horrible thing, but gangrene is much more merciful to your body than backbiting. So these are metaphors that are not just figures of speech, they are archetypical truths. God has created the world that way. So the archetype of backbiting is gangrene. Just as we said before in the Quranic verse, backbiting is likened to eating the dead flesh of one's brother, which you would never do. No one, that is outlandish. It is so abominable, we can't hardly mention it, but that's the truth. That's what it is. It is an abomination, and we have to receive it as such. And like that is gangrene. If gangrene gets into our bodies, we have to deal with that very quickly, or it will destroy us, it will kill us. Some of the early generations who were with the Salaf as-Salih, they said, when we encountered the Salaf, the noble men and women of the first generations, we found that they did not regard worship to pertain to much fasting or prayer. They all did that, mashallah. They knew that you have to do that. They knew it's very important. But, as you can imagine from what we said before, that for them to be a great worshipper, an abid, an abida, meant that you held back your tongue from speaking evil about the a'rad of people, about the honor of people, unless it is necessary to do that. And we'll talk about that, as we said, tomorrow, because sometimes we have to do that. And this is why it's so difficult. It's not absolutely forbidden. There are times when you have to warn people about others, and you have to know the people around you. You've got to evaluate people. Some people you can trust, some people you can't trust. So it's difficult. How do you do that and yet keep your tongue pure? But this is part of the ijtihad and the mujahada that we have to do. To repeat that in Arabic, they would say, أدركنا السلف الصالح وهم لا يرون العبادة في الصوم ولا في الصلاة ولكن في الكف عن أعراض الناس. Very, very beautiful. And it's so important to emphasize, as we've done before, that one thing about the Salaf as-Salih is that they were all people of the heart. Don't ever think that they were rigid and harsh and intolerant, like some people may be who claim to be following them. The Salaf were not like that. The Salaf were beautiful people, and all of them were masters of the heart. Many of them wouldn't talk about fiqh. They would teach you the basic fiqh you need to know, but they wouldn't give fatwas because they feared to do that, because it's a huge responsibility. So there's just a number of them who would give fatwa, and like Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, and others. But all of them were masters of the heart. All of them knew what makes our hearts healthy and what makes our hearts sick. Ibn Abbas said, if you want to speak of the faults of others, then speak about your own faults instead. And that's actually a very useful thing to do. He said, إذا أردت أن تذكر عيوب صاحبك فاذكر عيوبك. So that's a very good thing to do. And that's why also, if we're really sincere, and we ask Allah to make us that way, when people come and criticize us and say, you do this, you do that, maybe when you speak, you repeat a particular word too much. I know I do things like that. And in fact, when people tell me, I'm thankful to them for that. Because I don't want to do that. I don't know I'm doing it. So if you tell me, I'm thankful. We want to know our ayub, right? So that we can correct them. Why do we look in the mirror in the morning? We want to know if we're not ready to go out yet. We need to clean up some more or change the way that we present ourselves. So speak about your own faults. And this is very important too, because we are mirrors of each other. The believer is a mirror of the believer. So if I see a fault in you, why do I see it? Because it's actually in me. And this is the reason why, if you see faults in people, then look for that fault in yourself. And it may be that in that person, God bless that person and guide that person, that the fault is conspicuous. What about me? It's not conspicuous. So therefore, the benefit I get if I recognize the fault in another person is to look for that in myself. In that person, it's clear. In me, it's hidden. But I don't see that fault, usually, except for the fact that the likes of that is also in me. We're all very similar. We all have much in common, and we're all mirrors of each other. Malik ibn Dinar, who's a beautiful successor, and we went to East India, West India, Kerala, which is beautiful, beautiful. Kerala's very beautiful. And it's got 23 rivers. It's got lots of rain. It rains so much there. It's green. And it has all sorts of incredible fruits and bananas and coconuts and everything else. But in Kerala, they say that Malik ibn Dinar is the one who brought them Islam. And they say also that he laid the foundations of the first mosques. Whether that is historically true or not, I'm not sure. It might be. I can't say. In fact, I questioned some of the Indians about that, and they were really unhappy with me. It's like, so I said, okay, I won't ask any more questions about Malik ibn Dinar. But their mosques are really beautiful. These mosques they're the oldest mosques in India, and they're really beautiful. So anyway, Malik ibn Dinar was an incredible man, and he was from Basra, and it makes sense that he would leave Basra and go down the Arabian Gulf and go to Western India. Many people did that, so it's not far-fetched, but I don't know if he actually did it. But Malik ibn Dinar has many wise things to say. We mentioned some last time. One of them is a story about Jesus, and our Islamic sources are filled with stories about Jesus, aren't they? They're filled with stories about Moses and David. They're filled with stories about Solomon. It would really be valuable to collect all of these and to study them, because they are a treasure. And the question of authenticity, where do they come from? Well, that's another question. We could study that too. Very interesting. But in any case, this is a story about Jesus. So Malik ibn Dinar, he says that Jesus, alayhi salam, and his disciples once were walking, and they passed by the carcass of a dead dog, the rotting carcass of a dead dog. And the disciples said to Jesus, "How foul, it stinks. How foul is the smell of this dog?" Well, what do you expect? It's the rotting carcass of a dog. And he says, Jesus said, "But how very bright are his teeth." Imam al-Ghazali says that's because Jesus, peace be upon him, wanted to teach them not even to do riba of a dead dog, so that they accustom themselves not to do it ever. And also he wanted to accustom them to look for what is good. So even if you look at the dog, his teeth are very white. Okay, and so he's also showing them that when you speak about God's creation, even things that are ugly and that are repulsive, like the carcass of a dead dog, try to look for what is best. And that's a story, and maybe the story has in it exaggeration. But nevertheless, as we said before, if you look for good, you'll find it to no end of good. So that's an excellent thing to do. And if you want to look for evil or for ugliness, you'll find it to no end of ugliness. So look for what is good. I've had, by the grace of Allah, 2 trips to Muslim China. One of them in the year 2002, and the other one in, I think, 2010. And they were both fantastic trips. And the Muslims of China are extremely interesting people. As I mentioned before, I wrote an article about them, which you can find on the internet if you like. It's called Seek Knowledge in China, Thinking Beyond the Abrahamic Box. And if you read it, I hope you'll find it very interesting. Muslims of China are very amazing. And they've been there as long as Muslims have been in Egypt or Syria. They've been there for a long time, and they have an amazing culture. But when we were in China, on the last trip, we ended in Shanghai, and the Chinese Muslim culture is divided into northern Muslims and southern Muslims. The northern Muslims are north of the Yangtze River, which goes through Shanghai. And the southern Muslims are south of that. And the mosques are different. The culture is different. All the mosques are beautiful beyond words. You go and see for yourself. They are beautiful beyond words. They are Chinese, 100% Chinese. But they're also 100% mosques. And one of the architectural litmus tests of the mosque, like, what is a beautiful mosque? In my opinion, is that when you go in it, you don't want to come out. And all the Chinese mosques are like that. But in Shanghai, we ended by going to this incredible mosque that was over 600 years old. And, you know, it was very different from all the other mosques we'd seen because they were northern Chinese. It was white, black, red. The colors were different. But it was just spectacular. And it was hidden. In fact, it was so hidden that in the Cultural Revolution under Mao Zedong, you probably remember, you've probably heard about that. If you're my age, you know about it because it was in the news. But during the Cultural Revolution under Mao Zedong, many mosques and temples and religious buildings were destroyed. But this mosque was not, because it was so hidden. And so it was beautiful. We went there, we sat there, we talked about it. And but what occurred to me was, if you seek good, you'll find it to no end of good. Who would have ever believed that such a beautiful mosque could be found in Shanghai? And most of the mosques were destroyed. But here it was. And to me, it's just like, look for good and you will find it to no end of good. Look for beauty and you will find it to no end of beauty. And I just felt that one thing leads to another. If we could follow this thread of beautiful mosques and good things, it would lead to others and others and others. That's the way that the world is. So, again, Jesus and the dog, how beautiful are his teeth. And again, Imam al-Ghazali stresses, backbiting is not just about people. And it's not just about your sister or your brother. Backbiting is also about lands and peoples. So we might go to a Muslim land or a non-Muslim land, and we might not like it, but there's no reason to speak evil of it. And, you know, you can come to some countries. I first came to this country in 1973, and that was one of the most important years of my life. You know, those were at a time when, for example, the mosques had very few people in them. And, you know, women wearing scarves were also extremely rare. Very rare. And I couldn't find people. You know, so the first part of the time I was here was actually quite lonely. I was with good people. We were in the American University. I liked my friends. And then I was able to go to pilgrimage, mashallah. But after pilgrimage, I came back and I still had many months here. And then I began to meet people. And then Egypt began to open up to me. And people would have you over to their house and they would introduce you to other people. So then I finally discovered Egypt. And by the end of that time, which was in 1974, neither I or my wife wanted to go home. Before that, it's almost like it was lonely because we go to the mosque and there were very few people there. Not like today. Not like today at all. But, you know, so, you know, it takes time when you go to countries to discover those countries. And that's why it's always good. Have a good opinion of them. And many times, many countries, you know, you have to stay there for a long time before you actually know what is special about this country. What is good about this country. So it's very good. We don't speak evil of peoples. We don't speak evil of lands. Imam al-Ghazali said, don't even speak evil of the weather. God created the weather. Be thankful that you can live in the weather, even if it's hot, even if it's cold. So may Allah make us people who are always looking for the good, always looking for the beautiful. Zainul Abidin, may Allah be pleased with him. Ali ibn al-Husayn ibn Ali, Zainul Abidin, said that he never said La, except on one occasion, which was what? La ilaha illallah. That's when he would say La. Otherwise, you ask him for anything, he will give it to you. He won't refuse you. He's always giving, like his grandfather, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Zainul Abidin, he said, إِيَّاكَ وَالْغِيبَةِ فَإِنَّهَا إِدَامُ كِلَابِ النَّاسِ. He said, beware of backbiting, for it is the preferred condiment. It is the idam, and the condiment of the dogs of people. Those people who are like dogs. You don't want to be like them. You know, and people who enjoy speaking about other people, that's not natural for us. And it's true, we all know that there have been times when we've done it. And we all know that we enjoyed it. Most of us did, anyway. And you know that you could be in a group of people, especially when we're young, where we just talk and we laugh and it's so funny. And maybe we can't even stop laughing, it's so funny. But this is not the way we do, especially not as mature believers. Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, said, عليكم بذكر الله تعالى فإنه شفاء وإياكم من ذكر الناس فإنه داء. What beautiful words. I just really am astounded by the beauty of the words of the Sahaba and the Salaf. Again, because these are people whose silence was thought, whose silence was reflection, and whose speech was golden. عليكم بذكر الله تعالى فإنه شفاء. You know, you have to do dhikr of God, exalted be He, because it's a cure, it's a remedy. فإنه شفاء وإياكم وذكر الناس فإنه داء. And beware of speaking of people, especially, of course, speaking badly of people. That's what he means, because it is sickness. It will make us sick. You all know the hadith of a woman who was mentioned among the Prophet. روي أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is a sahih hadith, and probably all of us have heard it many times. روي أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذكرت له امرأة وكثرة صلاتها وصومها ولكنها تؤذي جيرانها بلسانها فقال هي في النار صلى الله عليه وسلم. So a woman was mentioned to the Prophet, and they told the Prophet about how much she prayed and how much she fasted, but that she would offend her neighbors with her tongue. She spoke evil of them, she backbit them, she did other things. And the Prophet said she will be in the fire. It doesn't mean that she's a disbeliever. Maybe she will go to the fire and she will come out. But again, this reminds us of what Imam al-Ghazali told us before, and that is for the Sahaba. The fact that you prayed a lot and fasted a lot, well, that's what you ought to do. But that doesn't mean that you are an abid or an abida unless you don't speak ill of people, and unless you do not abuse or offend people with your tongue. So she would hurt them, she would sting them, with her tongue. Imam al-Ghazali then explains to us that ghiba is not limited, however, to the tongue. So this is very important. He says ghiba was forbidden because it brings to other people's attention the nuqsan of your brother or your sister. This is why it's forbidden, because I am naqis. We are all like that. The sons and daughters of Adam and Eve, all of us are deficient, but Islam is a religion of honor. So we cover over each other's deficiencies. We don't point them out. We don't degrade people by pointing out things about them, even if those things are obvious. So this is why ghiba is forbidden, because the fact of it is to make people aware, to bring to their attention the nuqsan of their brother or their sister. And of course, you make known to others these things in a manner that he or she dislikes. So therefore, Imam al-Ghazali says, in ghiba, this is extremely important, ta'reed is the same as tasrih. In ghiba, roundabout speech which is ta'reed, is the same as explicit speech, right? Ta'reed is when we don't say the thing exactly, but we find some other indirect way to say it. So any ta'reed, any roundabout way of speaking that calls attention to a person's defect, it's riba. And when we talk about lying, we didn't have time to talk about it in great detail, but sometimes we have to do ta'reed to avoid lying. Roundabout ways of speaking, using puns, using figures of speech, and things like that. We don't want to lie, so often we can use ta'reed. We can use a roundabout way of speaking, and then you don't tell a lie. Okay? But Imam al-Ghazali said that doesn't work in riba. And riba, ta'reed, is the same as tasrih. Because here, what was the effect of the ta'reed? It made people understand. It brought to their attention some hidden defect or deficiency in that person that was not known before. And also, deeds are like words. So, for example, if you stutter to imitate a stuttering person, or if you make a lisp to imitate a person with a lisp, this is the same as saying that that person has a stutter, or that person has a lisp, or whatever it may be. And Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, she was, an incredibly wonderful person, one of the greatest of the Sahaba, but she learned many things, of course, from the Prophet, and she makes mistakes sometimes. And this is one of the beautiful things about her. So once she was sitting with other young women, with the Prophet ﷺ, and a woman came in to see the Prophet, or it might have been a young girl. But this woman, akramakullah, was extremely short. And so when she left, Aisha, Allah be pleased with her. I love Aisha, and you love Aisha. She's very funny to me. But she went like this. She raised her thumb. What she meant to say, like she's really short. Because my thumb, look at my thumb compared to my fingers, you see? So she went like, she's little. And the Prophet told her, you backbit her. You can't do that. Aisha didn't mean any harm. But she did that. She said, look, she's as short as a thumb. And the Prophet told her, no, you can't do that. That's backbiting. Again, these beautiful stories. I just have to say this. One of the things they tell us is that this legacy of Islam has been authentically transmitted. The story of Aisha raising her thumb, this is so authentic. You can taste the authenticity, isn't it? You can't make up things like this. And the hadith of the Prophet, the athar of the Sahaba and the Salaf, they are filled with examples like this. Stories that just are not to be made up. They are authentic. And I like to emphasize that because it is very important for us, academically and otherwise, to establish the amazing authenticity of our legacy of hadith and athar. And of course we know that the hadith have different levels. Some are sahih, some are hasan, some are da'if. All of those are potentially correct, by the way. It's just the da'if hadith, the weak hadith, we can't prove it. And we may assume that it's correct. We should, in fact. And we don't use the da'if hadith in law. Although the Hanbalis do, Allah bless them. Imam Ibn Hanbal, he will use a da'if hadith even in law. But Imam Malik, Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Abu Hanifa, they won't do that. But because a hadith is da'if, it doesn't mean it's false. But then we have also hadith mawdu'a. We have hadith that are fabricated, and mashallah, we know they are. So the science of hadith is an incredible thing. We know there are different levels. But in general, the transmission of this body of hadith is absolutely amazing. And if you read great books like the Muwatta, I love the Muwatta of Imam Malik. It was the first Arabic book I ever bought in my life. Where did I buy it? In Cairo. Where? Darul Ma'arif, around the American University. The other day we were going by there, and I said, there it is. That's where I bought my first book. It was the Muwatta of Imam Malik. How much did I pay for it? 1 Junaid. 1 Junaid. In those days, a Junaid was a lot of money. You probably don't remember that. You probably don't even know that. I received 50 Junaids a month, and we lived like kings in Egypt. 50 Junaids doesn't go very far today, does it? In those days, that was a lot of money. I was even able to make pilgrimage. You know, mashallah. So, but these stories, they show how authentic the transmission is. It's really a treasure. Movements, imitations, different things we write, cartoons, comical gestures, hateful gestures. All of these can be riba, so we have to be careful. We have to be careful. Pay attention to what we do. Imam al-Ghazali says, if you imitate a person, for example, by exaggerating the way they walk, or the limp they have, or something like that, he said, these in fact can be the greatest form of riba of all. And why? Because the image sticks in the mind. A word might be easily forgotten, but you saw him imitating the way that person walks. And that will stick, that image sticks in your mind. So it's often the most powerful because it has tasweer and it has tafhim. It makes you imagine it always, and you understand exactly what is meant by it. Then he said also, we could do riba by a general word. And the example he gives, he means a general word that's not necessarily clear. Like we say, for example, one of the people whom we saw today does such and such. Or one of the people who came today. Or maybe one of the people who didn't come today. But everybody knows who you're talking about. Is such and such and such and such. Does such and such and such and such. And of course, what is the criterion here? That the people know who you're talking about. They're able to figure that out. When the Prophet ﷺ disliked something that someone did, he very, very rarely ever corrected that person to his or her face. And usually he would say, after a while, مَا بَالُ أَقْوَامٍ يَفْعَلُونَ كَذَا وَكَذَا. What is it about people who do such and such? So again, in that, he wants to draw to our attention something that we shouldn't do, but he also wants to protect the honor of that person who did it, and not to draw attention to him. Imam al-Ghazali says one of the most khabith, one of the most akhbath, one of the foulest forms of riba is that of the hypocritical scholars and other learned persons, who have a very subtle and a very sugar-coated way sometimes of speaking evil of other people, especially people who are their rivals. And often he says they may even combine riba with subtle shows of hypocrisy and self-praise. So he said, for example, he might say, Alhamdulillahi alladhi lam yabtalina bid-dukhuli ala sultan. وَالتَّبَذُّلْ فِي طَلَبِ الْحُطَامِ. Praise be to God who did not afflict us with the trial or the affliction of keeping the ruler's company or soiling ourselves in seeking the lowly things of this world. Okay, so here he is speaking about particular scholars. And indeed, maybe they shouldn't be doing that. Maybe. It's true. But he does it in such a way that he doesn't even mention them, but they know who's being talked about. And then also, he is drawing attention to the fact that, but I don't do that. Alhamdulillah, who didn't afflict me without affliction. So he says, you know, this is the worst kind. This is akhbath al-ghiba. And then he even says, نعوذ بالله من قلة الحياء نسأل الله أن يعصمنا منها. Again, we could all say that right now. نعوذ بالله من قلة الحياء ونسأل الله أن يعصمنا منها. Ameen. Yeah. We seek refuge in God from lack of shame. And we ask God to protect us from that. Okay, beautiful dua. You can all make that. But then what if you make that in the context where everybody knows you're talking about a particular person? And in this case, Imam al-Ghazali is talking about scholars. And that is, in fact, one of the main things that Imam al-Ghazali talks about in the Ihya, because the scholar must be a scholar of the hereafter. And that is a scholar who believes and knows that the hereafter is more precious than this world. And we ask Allah to bless our scholars and to benefit our scholars. But when the scholar goes wrong, thousands and thousands of people are harmed. And this is true in all ages. So may Allah protect us all, may He protect our scholars. May He protect our tongues in speaking about these things. Al-Ghazali says, is time up?
15 minutes.
Okay. Imam al-Ghazali says also, people can do riba, and again, he says, beware of the scholars. He says that also, riba can be done in the form of a dua. Or by first praising a person and then doing riba of them. He says, ما أحسن أحوال فلان ما أحسن أحوال فلان ما كان يقصر في العبادات ولكن قد اعتراه فتور وابتلي بما ابتلي به كلنا وهو قلة الصبر. So he gives that example of a scholar who's saying that how excellent were the conditions of this particular person. But then he was afflicted by shortcomings in his acts of worship, and he was afflicted by that sort of, loss of aspiration, futur, that we are all afflicted by, and by little sabr. So the man here is saying that, he was so good, but he was afflicted by this, and we are all afflicted by that. But Imam al-Ghazali says, beware, because this is the worst kind of riba. Because you have made it very clear that this person has that defect, and there is no justification for mentioning that unless it is really serious, and you have to protect people from them. سَأَنِي مَا جَرَى عَلَى صَدِيقِنَا مِنَ الْإِسْتِخْفَافِ بِهِ نَسْأَلَ اللَّهَ أَنْ يُرَوِّحَ نَفْسَهُ. So he gives another example. Like, it makes me feel so bad, what has happened to our beloved friend, that people take him so lightly. And we ask God to make things easy for him. Again, these same words could be spoken, in complete honesty and truthfulness. But Imam al-Ghazali is saying, he wants us to imagine an example where a person is saying that actually to draw attention to that person's defect. So it's put in beautiful language. It's put in sweet language. Maybe it's even a dua. Imam al-Ghazali also says, it is riba to listen to riba. This is really difficult. It is backbiting to listen to backbiting. And, in this case, we are often put in a really difficult situation. We're sitting with people and they start to talk about others, and what do we do? Maybe you could get up and you could leave, maybe you can change the conversation. One of the things is that you can always defend that person. And even if what they say is true, you can say, that's not true. This is where it's permissible to do that, because you want to defend their honor. You say, no, that's not true at all. Just as if a person came to you and said that so-and-so spoke evil of you, which is true. And you can say, no, he didn't. He spoke of you very highly, and I know him. And in fact, he thinks very highly of you. Okay, but here you're doing that to try to mend the relations and to make them strong. Imam al-Ghazali said also, when people are speaking about others and they're backbiting others, he said, be very careful that you don't say or do anything to encourage them, like nodding our heads. Oh, is that so? Or maybe, subhanallah, I didn't know that. So things like that, encourage them. It's like, okay, I'm with you and this is interesting, I'm listening. I never knew that before. That's amazing. I never heard that about them. He said, always try to defend the person as much as possible who's being backbitten. And as I said, this even allows you to deny things. Because they're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to disclose this information. And therefore, you can deny it. You can say, no, this is not true. He's not that way. On the contrary, I know that he's not that way, or she's not that way. Because you're defending the honor of that person. And if you do that, God will defend your honor as well. And he said also, speak against it in your heart. Be very careful to do that. That I don't like to hear this, I don't want to hear this, I don't know if I can get up and leave. Situations are often different. It's not just one condition, we live in so many different conditions. But speak against it in your heart. Change the topic, get up and leave. And Imam al-Ghazali says that shaitan often plays with people, and here again he mentions the scholars who are not living up to par. Scholars who are embedded in rivalry with other scholars and things like that. May Allah guide us all. And he said that for a lot of people, because of their ignorance, and this is also a type of ignorance, that shaitan plays with them like a child plays with a ball, kicks it wherever he wants to go. And that's because they're very easy to manipulate. Their guard is not up, they become accustomed to these things, they justify them to themselves. And he said that this may be especially true when that person is given to much worship. Isn't that strange? Isn't that counterintuitive? But this is because of the fact that the person who's given to much worship, one of the problems that he or she faces is that often they hold themselves in extremely high esteem. And they also begin to feel that because they're so good, and because they worship God so sincerely, that they will necessarily be forgiven. And so therefore they allow themselves often to say and do things they wouldn't ordinarily do. And probably, Allah knows best, this is the explanation regarding the woman who prayed a lot and fasted a lot, but she would rip her neighbors apart with her tongue. So her abundant fasting and prayer only made her all the more egotistical. And that's why, again, the wisdom of the Sahaba was that you should pray a lot, you should fast a lot. God make it possible for you to do that in the most sincere way. But if I am not able to control my tongue, I can't be considered a worshiper. If I do not have good character, I cannot be considered a good worshiper. And this is why in our Islamic tradition we have statements like the statement that I think we've mentioned before, that if you do something wrong, you can set it right by one act of tawbah. And then you get things right again. But if you begin to get things right, and to do the things you're supposed to do, and to pray and to fast, you need 70 acts of tawbah. That's counterintuitive, right? And why? And many of our wise people say that. If I am going to worship God and pray and fast, I need 70 tawbah. Why? Because what I'm doing is wrong? No. What I'm doing is absolutely right, but maybe it goes to my head. And then maybe I begin to think that I am better than other people. And one of the great fitness of Islam, from the beginning, even to the present day, is takfir. This is a horrible sin. May Allah protect us from it. But many times the people who do takfir, from the very beginning, they are people who pray and fast, and they regard themselves to be very good. Everything they do is just the way they think it ought to be done. But it all went to their heads. It all became ego. And it made them look down on other people, and even to regard other people to be disbelievers. So that is khasara, ba'da khasara. And this is why on the spiritual path, the better you get, the more help you need. So that you don't become led astray by ujub, by self-satisfaction and by self-delusion. Nas'alullah al-afwa al-afiyah. So I think we'll stop here, right? And inshallah, tomorrow, we want to continue. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will talk about backbiting in the heart, which is very subtle and very, very important. Don't backbite with your tongue, but also don't backbite in your heart. Don't have a bad opinion about people. Because just like if we were to say, oh, he's this way, she's this way, they do that, they do this, so we also do that secretly in my heart. That you see somebody that for some reason you don't have a high opinion of, and you begin to imagine all sorts of things about them, right? Maybe even to the extent that you can't be natural with them. They never did anything wrong. You don't even know if what you believe about them is true. And usually it's not true. And yet, I can't smile in his face. I can't be nice to him. So Imam al-Ghazali said, let us talk about riba in the heart. Don't let it even get started. Have a clean heart. And inshallah we'll talk about that tomorrow. And also tomorrow, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, we'll talk about when it is permissible to talk about other people. So please don't ask about that tonight, because we're going to talk about that tomorrow, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Any questions? Yes, thank you. Oh my goodness. All kinds of questions. Any questions from the floor?
Actually, Hisham had a question too.
Okay.
I had a question of the definition of honor, because here it could be perceived just honor like da'ird, as or honor is reputation, or anything negative is included within it.
Mm-hmm. Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, I had a question about the definition of honor. Does honor here include reputation, or it includes also honor is da'ird, or does it include reputation and everything as well, like equality? Because I didn't understand this well.
Okay, so what is honor?
Yeah.
And does honor include reputation? So honor is the honorable impression that we have about people. And it includes reputation, for sure. Honor is extremely important. And honor is the basis of civilization. Okay, so, and this is why also, we are tested by everything. Everything is a test. So our scholar, we talked before, what are the 6 maqasid kubra? I like to say 6 and not 5 because I always want to include honor. Preservation of religion, sound religion, good religion, not fanatic extremist religion that destroys everything. That's not deen. Okay? Real religion, the religion of the Prophet ﷺ, the religion of mercy, the preservation of the self, so that you're protected from harm. You're safe in your home. Your home's not going to be bombed, or you're not going to have thieves come through the windows at night. Preservation from disease and things like that. Preservation from starvation. Preservation of intellect, so that we know how to use our minds. We know how to think. And we're protected from insanity. And we're protected from all sorts of other things that affect the intellect. Preservation of nasab and nasl, which I like to call preservation of the family, because it's about the family. And preservation of property. And we can call that economy. That we are able to get wealth, and to keep wealth, and to increase wealth. And that's really important, how difficult it is for many people today to survive. And you can go to countries where it's almost impossible for the people to survive, no matter what they do. So that's not right. Islam does not want that. We want to make it easy for people who are honest and hardworking, to be able to get wealth and to build their wealth and, to increase their wealth. And, in Islamic history, we have incredible examples of that, historical examples. With the rise of Islam, Spain, Portugal, Sicily, North Africa, Egypt, Greater Syria, Persia, Central Asia, these lands became so wealthy, you cannot measure it. You cannot measure it. And this is because you had a free market. Can you imagine that? A free market going all the way from China and Indonesia across the world, where also merchants and others are protected, even if they're Christian merchants or Jewish merchants. And you have everything being imported and exported. This is true. You have ihya al-mawat. The peasant, Christian, or Jew or Muslim can bring the earth to life and own it. And that destroyed the feudal system. The feudal system of Sicily, which was a Greek feudal system, was destroyed by that. And Sicily was turned into, for 300 years, an emerald island. I read that by Italian historians, not by Muslims who are romantic. Spain and Portugal, they say you couldn't put your foot down on the ground in Spain or Portugal without finding an olive tree that had been planted by somebody. Because you bring it to life, you own it. And what happened? The wealth of the Muslim world was so great that it caused economic depression in Northern Europe. And this is a fact that was discovered in the early 20th century by Henri Perrin, who's a famous economic historian. He found that, he studied it really carefully, that with the rise of Islam in Spain and Portugal, there was a huge depression in what is today Denmark, Sweden, Norway, England, Ireland, Northern Germany, Holland. Perrin knew that happened, and he knew it had to be connected to the Muslim world. And so he assumed, this is before World War II, that this was because of economic warfare. That the Muslims who had conquered Spain and Portugal, that they conducted economic warfare against Europe. That's called the Perrin thesis. After World War II, historians began to study that again. I was the friend of one of them. His name was Ehrenkreutz. He was a good historian. And Ehrenkreutz and others, they showed that never happened. We have no evidence whatsoever of economic warfare. On the contrary, Muslims opened up their markets to anyone who wanted to come. You simply had to have aman. You had to be given ta'meen. You're allowed to come in, and it was very easy, just like you have a visa. But this was even easier than a visa. And you will be protected in the Muslim lands. If you have a caravan, and your caravan is attacked, the ruler is supposed to replace it, because he was supposed to protect you. And that did happen. So what happened then? And then people like Abram Kreutz, they showed that what happened was that the Islamic world became so wealthy beyond measure that European merchants no longer went north. Because they used to have something like رحلة الشتاء والصيف, the journey of the summer, the winter and the summer, where merchants, let's say in southern France or in Italy, they would go in the summertime up to the north to get furs, to get valuable furs, to get flax, maybe to get lumber, and things like that. There's not a whole lot up there, actually. There's no gold, there's no silver, there's no salt, there's no pepper. Okay? And then, in the winter, they would go south to southern markets. But with the rise of Islam, there is no economic incentive to go north, because you've got everything there in the market. You've got a fortune to make in the market. And this is extremely important in world history. And I better stop, because if I start talking about that, we won't have any more questions. It's really important in medieval history. It's really important. But now, protection of wealth, and then protection of ird, protection of honor. And in our legal tradition, our scholars will say, Imam al-Shatibi talks about that, other great scholars talk about that if any of these maqasid is destroyed, the whole society will fall. Usually societies, civilizations, don't fall in a day and a night. They may take 100 years to fall. It may be faster than that, it may be slower. But any society that cannot preserve deen, that cannot preserve nafs, that cannot preserve aql, that cannot preserve the family, that cannot preserve wealth, and that cannot preserve honor, it will be destroyed. It will fall. Not that it'll be destroyed necessarily, like enemies will come from the outside and destroy it, but it cannot survive. Whether it is Muslim or Christian or Jewish or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever it might be. And so this is a very significant thing for us. Because when we look at many societies, even many Western societies that are progressive, quote unquote, is the deen preserved there? No. Maybe it's gone. Is the nafs preserved there? Well, yes and no. When I was teaching at one university in the United States, the University of Michigan, and I came to the secretary's office one day to get my mail, and she said, "You didn't hear about Professor Bailey? He was one of the big professors in our department. And he was also a Christian clergyman. He had been educated in Switzerland, and he was famous. He committed suicide." To me, that was one of the biggest shocks of my life. I didn't know what to say. It's like James Bailey, he was my friend also. It's like he committed suicide. It's like, what has gone wrong? To me, he represented the best that American society has to offer. And yet, he committed suicide. And that's a big problem that we have. It's a big problem in Switzerland. It's a big problem in Sweden. That's the nafs. The nafs has also got to be protected from myself, right? That I don't harm myself. And, we have other problems too, like cutting. Do you know what that is? Yeah, you know what it is. Maybe some people, most people in the West, they know what it is. Usually girls do it. They cut themselves. You can see it. It make you cry. They cut themselves, usually with a razor. And why do they do that? You know, it hurts. When they cut it, it doesn't hurt. But then it hurts. And they feel they deserve that. And it's like, you poor thing. You don't deserve anything like that. And you can find girls that have their whole arm, you know, with scars. They cut themselves. Oh, that's not right. That's not right. And some of them are suicidal. The nafs has to be protected. And then also in some cases we have crimes. In my own city, Chicago, there are areas of the city where, you know, very dangerous. Gangs. You know, we have a great organization in Chicago called Iman, Inner City Muslim Action Network. I love them very much and they do incredible work. And they're not in a very dangerous part of the city, but many young people can't come to see them because they have to cross gang territory and they don't belong to that neighborhood and they don't have protection from that gang and they may be killed. This is a problem we have in the United States. Chicago has a big problem with that. Gangs. And I knew an African-American boy. You know, I knew him from the time he was a baby. And, you know, he was a beautiful young man. I knew his mother. And he wasn't really a Muslim. He's sort of in between. He liked to wear a kufi. And he talked good things about Islam. And one day, he was shot down in front of his mother's house, dead. His mother, poor thing, she died a year later. She couldn't live without him. Why was he shot? Gang killed him. He may have done something, or maybe the police never found out. They didn't really care. You know, but again, it's a lot of times with the gangs, it's like in order to be in the gang, you've got to kill somebody. So he could have been shot at random. Probably he wasn't. This is not right. This is not right. The nafs has to be protected. The aql, the intellect. We have insanity. In some countries like my own, may God guide my country, may God protect the Muslims there, may He enable us to do good in that country. Some people would say that 1 out of every 4 people is in psychological trouble. That's not right. That's not healthy, right? You know, property. You know, like you ought to be able to make a living, right? And again, it's really hard for some people. In fact, this is a very sad thing, but in my own country, a lot of people are very wealthy. And a lot of people, most of the people, have to work really hard just to be able to keep up. A lot of times they have to have 2 jobs. That's not the way it should be. Yes, it's great if you work hard, but you should be able to make something to show for it, right? So it should be, people should be able to get wealth and to increase wealth. And in our own history, we have incredible examples of times when that was facilitated. And that made us really civilized people. And historically, wealth and the cultivation of wealth, you know, is essential also to the cultivation of knowledge. This is why in Islamic history, where do you find the great scholars? Where do you find the great universities? At the crossroads of the economic markets. You know, where there's money. Money is important. And then also you have family. And where is family? And, you know, I know my country better than any place in the world. So I love my country. And, you know, hubbul watani min al-iman. To love your country is part of the faith. May Allah set the country right. May He help it, right? But family. How many families are destroyed? How many families have no sound relations between the brothers, the sisters. Also, abuse. This is a big problem in many Western societies. Abuse tears the family apart. Shouldn't be like that. And then you have also children that have no father. They don't even know who their father is. And in some cases, in some inner cities, like Detroit, people, I've heard this from Dr. Jackson, who's a great Muslim, he said 60% in Detroit. That's not good. And then what happens to these children? How do they learn? How do they grow up? How do they become healthy? These are big problems, really big problems. Honor. So honor has to always be protected. And in Islam, we bend over backwards to defend each other. Right? This is what you have to do. You defend your sister's honor. You defend your brother's honor. And you can, even in doing that, you can say things that are not exactly true. Especially if someone attacks his honor. You say, no, that's not true at all. He's not like that. He's this way instead, or she's that way. She never said that. And then you're a hero because you are defending their honor. Sorry for the long, roundabout answer. Yes?
How can we place How can we place the verse of إن الله لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء من القول إلا من ظلم وكان الله سميعا عليما? How can we
Okay,
place
now
this?
my respected sister. That we will talk about tomorrow. That we will talk about tomorrow. Okay? The very verse we'll talk about tomorrow.
Thank you.
That's a very good question. But we'll do that tomorrow, okay? Inshallah. Allah bless you. So, yes.
Hisham had a question.
Okay, then I have to answer his question. Yes.
You keep mentioning these three rules when it comes to speech, that it must be true, it mustn't harm, and it must bring benefit. Is that his summarization, or is it a qaida mentioned by Imam al-Ghazali somewhere, or someone else?
This is a qaida mentioned by Imam al-Ghazali. And I don't have enough knowledge to be able to tell you about what other scholars say about that. I know that from Imam al-Ghazali. Imam al-Ghazali is a great scholar in the core of the tradition, and what he says is very careful. But, of course we speak the truth. We don't lie. And of course we don't cause harm with the words we do. Al-Ghiba is based on that. And of course we want the speech that we say to be beneficial. Otherwise it's abath. So usually these kinds of qawa'id, which Imam al-Ghazali has very clearly in the Ihya, that usually the scholars arrive at them by looking at all the elements of the law. Such as, for example, tonight we're talking about ghiba. So ghiba tells us a lot about this qaida, because in ghiba, what we say is true, but what we say is harmful. So that helps us to build that qaida.
Can you cite the reference, please, Sidi? Hisham is asking for the reference.
Well, I'd have to look in my notes. I'd have to look at my notes, and we'll see what we can do, inshallah. You mentioned that it is not everyone's individual right to call someone who is non-Muslim kafir. How do we explain this concept to those who then respond, but it is in the Quran that they are kuffar? First of all, what I said was that in Islamic societies, Ahlul Dhimma, who are the protected communities, that's what Dhimma means, and these would be the Jews, Christians, Magians, Buddhists, Hindus, others who are under the protection of the Muslim community. They have a covenant with the Muslim community. They must be protected. And they must be treated well. And it was forbidden, and it is forbidden, to say to the dhimmi, ya kafir, even though we may believe that they are just that. It may be that they know Islam as well as you do, and yet they don't follow it. But we can't say that to them because it is impolite. And according to the laws of dhimma, you cannot offend the dhimmi. And this is one of the reasons also why the dhimmi usually dressed in a special way. Not so that they could be abused, but so that they would not be abused. Because I don't have those rights. As a Muslim, you can say all kinds of things to me. You can't slander me. If you slandered me, then I could take you to court. But you can be impolite to me because I'm a Muslim and you're a Muslim. You can't do that to a dhimmi. This is Islamic law. The dhimmi cannot be disrespected. And they had to be defended also from harm. They had all the same basic rights that Muslims had. To live, to eat, to drink, to work, to be safe, to be protected from robbers, to be protected from thieves, to be protected from enemies on the outside, because sometimes enemies would attack the Ahlul Dhimma. When the Crusaders came into the Muslim world, they were very rough and very tough and very brutal. This is well known in history. And they didn't just hurt Muslims. They attacked dhimmis also. They attacked Jews, they attacked even Christians. Christians who were not Latin Christians, who were not Catholic, Roman Catholic Christians, were regarded to be just as heretical as anybody else. Whether they were Orthodox, whether they were Armenian Christians, whether they were Jacobite Christians, Copts or Jacobite Christians, by the way. All those people were in danger. So all of those people had to be protected. Kufr. Allah calls the people kufr. Who does Allah call people that are kafir or kufar? The person who is a kafir is a person who knows the truth and knows the truth is true and rejects it despite that fact. A person like Abu Lahab, a person like Abu Jahl, a person to whom the hujjah has come and they know it's a hujjah and yet they reject it. This is what we call kufr. This is what the Quran calls kufr. And to say, for example, that American society is a kafir society, or to say that Europe is a kafir society, do they know what Islam is? What do they see on the news? What do they hear in the media? And they see a person, who's standing there with with his face covered with a knife about to cut someone's head off. May Allah protect us. Is there anything more ugly and despicable in the world? And then they say, this is Islam, Islamic State. So this is not good. And may Allah enable us to make the truth clear. But at the same time, it excuses them because they don't know what this deen is at all. No person can be said to be a kafir until they know this religion is the truth and they reject it as an act of will, not an act of ignorance. And one of the fundamental concepts of Islam is of Ahlul Fatra, the people of the interval when the religion of the prophets is lost. And our scholars will say that the people of Fatra, the people of the gap, when the prophetic teaching is taught, and we have different opinions on that, but one of the strongest opinions of all is that these people, and this is Ibn Taymiyyah's opinion, in fact, and many others, that they will be judged according to what they knew. Ibn Taymiyyah even says that even if they were Trinitarians and they believed in the divinity of Christ, but this is what was there in their books or in the reading they were given of their books, and they didn't know anything else, he said God will judge them on the basis of what they knew and excuse them on the basis of what they didn't know. Allah is merciful. He doesn't do injustice to people. And today, I would say that Islam is the biggest secret on the face of the earth. You know, mashallah, you know that Islam is good. You know, you come from a great country, and you've heard great scholars, and in this country you have amazing scholars. I cannot cease to be amazed by the depth of their learning. I wish I had learning like that. I wish I had knowledge of Arabic like they do. I wish I had knowledge of the Quran and Hadith and Fiqh as they have. Maybe Allah will give us that. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. The pride of this country is Azhar. The pride of the Muslim world is Azhar. You have incredible scholars, and I happen to have a particular love for Shaykh Usama as-Sayyid. May Allah bless him. When this man speaks, I cannot cease to be astounded of how much he knows. This is a treasure. And you've tasted things like that. You've seen people like that. And you know how beautiful Ramadan is. And so you know that Islam is good nevertheless. Although many young people today are extremely confused. And they have a right to be confused. And we have an obligation to unconfuse them. But these are qutta' turuq. These are highway robbers that cut off the path. What would Europeans, what would the English, what would the Scots and the Irish and the Canadians and the Americans say about Islam if they saw the real version of it? That's a very interesting question. I myself believe that many of them are much better than I am and much more intelligent than I am. And I've seen many of them become Muslims, and I became a Muslim myself. And it's how would they ever know that? Shaykh Hamza Yusuf, may Allah bless him. His father is an extremely intelligent man. And his father is a master of literature. His father has read the whole of Shakespeare. He does a khatam. Maybe twice a year. He's done over 60 khatams of everything in Shakespeare. He knows Shakespeare in and out. He knows Don Quixote. He's an amazingly learned man, extremely intelligent man. And Shaykh Hamza has always told him about Islam. Always told him about Imam al-Ghazali. He loves Imam al-Ghazali. And after Daesh appeared, he actually came to Shaykh Hamza and he said to him, "Is this Islam?" And Shaykh Hamza said something to the effect that, I've never been more hurt in my life. Because it's like, even you doubt this? After all I've said and all these years and the things you've read? This is a very intelligent man. And even he has to ask Shaykh Hamza, is this really Islam? No, it's not. This is the Antichrist. The Antichrist cuts you off from God. And the religions are destroyed from the inside. You can't destroy them from the outside. It's very hard. You destroy them from the inside. So these are testing times. These are difficult times. But most Europeans, most Americans, they have no idea what this religion is. Our brother here is of Mexican background. What if the Mexican people knew about Islam? What if they knew about it? I wouldn't be surprised if the whole country entered into Islam. Some people went into Chiapas in southern Mexico, and they gave da'wah, and the people in Chiapas, they are like tribal people, and they follow their elders. And as I understand from the story, some of the families with elders became Muslims, and all kinds of families became Muslims in Chiapas. Okay, this is great. This is wonderful. Oh, God bless them. May we help them. But then nobody there to teach them. nobody there to help them. This group comes in, that group comes in. This one says, those are kafirs, these are kafirs, these are this way, that is, and now they're divided into 4 groups. Heaven help us. I am ashamed. I'm ashamed of myself. This is not right. We've got to be able to help them. Kufr and shukr. You know, what is the linguistic opposite of kufr? Shukr. Right? And the Quran even says that. You know, the Quran uses shukr and kufr together like that. What is shukr? Shukr, and of course iman is the essence of shukr. But shukr is when you recognize the good that has been done. 1, recognition. And 2, you respond appropriately by giving thanks, by being good with regard to God, by obeying Him. That's shukr. Children are never shakir, although they're wonderful. They're wonderful, okay? But, you know, is the baby shakir? The baby cries all night. The baby demands to be nursed. The baby demands to be changed. And when you do it, they don't say thank you. Right? They just go to sleep. Right? Because the baby doesn't recognize what you're doing. They just know, I need this to be done. So the baby doesn't recognize what you're doing. And therefore the baby can't give thanks. When the baby grows up and becomes a man or a woman, then you say, my mother, how could I ever thank you for what you did? I mean, you were so good to me. And I never thanked you, I couldn't. So now I do. Now I'm thankful to you for everything you did. Because now you understand. Now you recognize. And now you respond. What is kufr? Shaitan is the first of the kafirin. Does he disbelieve in God? Absolutely not. He believes in God. But shaitan, the kufr is that you recognize the good. Because kufr is essentially ingratitude. It's the opposite of shukr. So you recognize the good, and then you refuse to admit it. Right? So let's say that you did me so much good. I had no money, you loaned me money, you helped me, you got me a house, you did all these things for me. And now I have succeeded, and I've made a fortune, and I paid off my house, and I don't need you anymore. And so you come to me and you say, how are you? And I don't even give you the time of day. That's kufr. Because I know that you did great things to me, but I refuse to acknowledge it. That's what the kafir is. Shaitan is a kafir. He knows God. He knows God's greatness. He knows the truth of Islam, but he refuses to submit. And he refuses to acknowledge. So kufr requires iqamat al-hujjah. You have got to establish the proof. May we be able to do that. And we've got to show people, we have to show ourselves today what this religion is, how great it is. And then we have to, bring it to people in ways that, if you want to give someone a gift, you don't wrap it in a paper bag or a garbage sack, do you? You put it in a beautiful sack, or you wrap it in a nice way. This is the way you present the gift. And we have to do the same thing with Islam. We have to wrap it in a beautiful way. And, when things have been harmed by deeds, it's very hard to change them with words. Very hard to change them with words. And unfortunately, you and I, we know the complexity of our world, the Muslim world. And we know that a person who goes and wraps a bomb around himself and blows up innocent people is totally wrong. This is not Islam. And all Muslims used to know that. I remember a long time ago when the Fidaiyin first began their work in Palestine. And you may know about those days or not. That's the 1960s and the 1970s. And all Muslims were saying, is this permissible? Because the Fidai would undertake attacks. He wasn't a suicide bomber, but he would undertake attacks, on Israeli soldiers in which he was not likely to survive. And all Muslims, I remember that time really clearly, was saying, is this permissible? Because it looks like suicide. Look how we've changed today. And, I know a general in Pakistan who is a great man. He's one of the best Pakistani generals who ever was. And he's a very humble man and a good man. He told me of an incident where a mullah went to a particular village in northern Pakistan. And the mullah looked like a particular type of mullah who, God forbid, is behind this stuff. And a young man came to him, a sincere young man, and he said to him, I want you to help me. He said, what? He said, my list on the list of suicide bombers, my name on the list of suicide bombers is way down at the bottom. Maybe number 40, number 50. I want to go to paradise. Can you intercede and get me to be number 1, 2, 3, or 4? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. What has happened to us? It makes you cry. It's like, what will we do? This is sheer ignorance. This is horrible beyond words. And these are evil scholars. Wallahi. These are awliya al-shaytan. And they are teaching these people that. So may Allah enable us to get things right and to get our house in order. But be merciful on other people. I know several Japanese who have entered Islam. Allah bless them. And I can tell you stories of 2 of them, at least. One of them is a woman. And her father told you, don't you ever become a Muslim. She said the Muslims will treat you like a dog. And, how did he know that? Well, unfortunately, he had experiences with certain Muslims. He said, they'll treat you like a dog. And she became a Muslim, and she got married, and guess what? She was treated like a dog. And again, she was treated like a dog. May Allah bless her, may Allah protect her. She almost committed suicide twice, because of the things she was going through. But she always held back. And I think now she is in a good situation, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. Really, we've got to get our house together. We've got to take care of each other. We've got to educate our people. And then you expect the world. You expect the Japanese to be fascinated about Islam? If you want the Japanese to be fascinated about Islam, you better show them something that is worthy of respect. And, most people who are atheists in the world, whether they're Muslims or Buddhists or Hindus or Jews, they are atheists because of so-called believers. Most Christians are atheists because they see so much hypocrisy in the church. They just don't want it anymore. And this happens to us too. Most atheists are not atheists because they have theological issues or metaphysical confusion. No. They're atheists because what do believers do? And they say that if this is religion, I don't want any part of it. So may Allah hifd deen. We've got to protect the religion. And protecting the religion is making the religion right, making the religion sound. The Prophet ﷺ was sent as a mercy to the worlds. And yet, many times, our Muslim brothers and sisters cause us trouble. And I have no complaints. Alhamdulillah, I'm thankful that Allah guided me. I'm thankful that I'm here today. I love this religion. This is my life. And Allah blessed me also by finding really beautiful men and women who I believe embodied the prophetic truth. And I would see all these other things around me, but I say that this is what I believe in. I believe in what you do. I believe in what you teach. And you are beautiful. And this is the way we should be. And I think if it weren't for that, I don't know if I'd be a Muslim today. I know in my own case, and I hope that I'm not wrong in saying this, but any problems I had in 45 years as a Muslim, they didn't come from anyone who was a Jew, and they didn't come from anyone who was a Christian. They came from people who had names like my own. I don't mind. I have no complaints. But again, this is not the way it should be, right? And of course, the beauty I saw in Muslims is beyond words. I don't want to give the impression that I had a negative experience, because I didn't. But things are not the way they ought to be. And we hope that Allah enables us, to make them that way. May the good people be able to come together and join hands to do what is right, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And may we, especially in countries like the United States and Canada, may we be able to establish this religion in beautiful communities that are vanguard communities. And then by that show the people, this is Islam. And anyway, ask Allah to guide us and to protect us. And I hope this is, always talking about speech, always talking about the tongue. And at nighttime I say, you shouldn't have said that, you shouldn't have said that, you shouldn't have said that. Pray for me. It's so hard. It's so hard, right? It's hard for all of us. But we ask Allah to enable us to get control of our tongues. And we ask Allah to bless this ummah, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Allahumma wafiqna lima tuhibbuhu wa tardah. وَاجْعَلْنَا مِنْ عَبِيدِكَ السُّعَدَاء وَأَمِتْنَا عَلَى كَلِمَةِ الْهُدَى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما آمين 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 يا رب العالمين.